Come off mute. Good afternoon. Welcome to this session of Shape Your Future, our Careers in STEM webinar series with STELR and the Academy of Technology. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm meeting with you today as we gather online. I am on Ngunnawal and Ngambri land here in Canberra, and we would love to know where you guys are meeting from us as well, but we would like to pay respect to elders past and present and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us online. We will share and discuss our own knowledge and practices, and we acknowledge the deep knowledge forever embedded in country. So today we are on our second session for this term for the Shape Your Future series. And this is a really great opportunity for school students to hear about the career pathways in STEM. And today we are going to be hearing from Dr. Vitomir Kovanović, and he's a data scientist from the University of South Australia, if my brain is working me correctly. Now, there's just a couple of bits of housekeeping. If you have questions for Vitomir, please put them in the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, not the chat function, because we'll be able to see them better in the Q&A. And feel free to add them there at any time if we want to answer them during the talk, but there will be a Q&A section at the end. So you will be able to answer your questions, and we'll have a chat about Vitomir's work. So without any more ado, I would like to introduce you to Vitomir, who's going to talk about his work and his career STEM journey. Now.
All right. Thank you so much for the invite to come to present. And I'm really honored to give you a bit about information about my journey in science and what I'm doing, how I came up to my current position, and so on. So let me just first share my slides. I guess that will help a bit. All right. So to start, so first, I'm a senior lecturer at University of South Australia. So I work at the Center for Change and Complexity in Learning, which is a very long and complicated name, basically to say work in the center that focuses on improvement of learning, how we can improve the way students learn. And what I really do at the end of the day, I'm researching educational technologies. So how students use technologies, how teachers use technologies to teach, and how we can use all of these technologies and the data they are producing to help students and teachers. So both ways, whether to help them to learn better or to help them to teach better. And just briefly about myself, so I was born in 1984, so I'm, I guess, now 38, and originally from Belgrade, Serbia. And in 2002, I finished high school, and I was, back then, I wasn't really thinking much about science, to be honest. My major focus was in all my primary and high school was rollerblading. So I was very passionate about rollerblading. That was the thing I was doing day in, day out. And that was the thing that was really doing. I wasn't doing science or too much STEM or anything like that where I was in high school. So I can briefly, let me just, I'm not sure whether you'll be able to see it, but this was like me in high school rollerblading on the streets in Belgrade, doing some cool stuff that I wouldn't be able ever to repeat again. But yeah, that was the back then that occupied me. So in 2002, when I finished high school, I started university degree in computer science. And I always liked computers. I always loved sci-fi movies and always wanted to do something with computers. But really, up before starting university, I had almost zero interaction. In fact, I didn't have a computer, neither laptop or a desktop, until I was year 12. And I was doing at the university fine, completing, pretty much being on track with that. But last year of the program was 4 years back in Serbia. I started working as a programmer. I got an offer and I started with some friends and I started working as a programmer. And then a year later, I completed my studies. That was a bit of a tricky thing, maybe not the best decision, because I was underestimating how much time full-time work takes. So it was way more challenging. I was supposed to finish maybe in 2-3 months. It took me more than a year and a half to finish those few last courses that I was thinking that I'm going to do them while working. And then what funny thing was, back in the day, I enrolled at the master's program in 2009, and primarily to avoid going to military. And the funny thing was, back then, the military was moved to be voluntary, but I would be the last generation of students to go to military. And I really didn't want to waste, 6 months of my life to do that. So I was looking any way to avoid that. Literally, if I was 3 months older, I wouldn't be, 3 much younger, I wouldn't be going to military. So I just enrolled into master's with the primary intention just to be in the master's for a year and avoid going to military, because I would be, wasting money, wasting time. And in the meantime, then I finished, while I was doing, I finished master's. Master's was much easier to finish because it was really meant for people who are anyways working professionals. And during this time, I really got bored in my current position. I was doing pretty much the same work for 3 years. The time was flying by. I wasn't doing any progress and was really nervous. Like, this wasn't an easy time for me. I was really nervous, like what I'm doing with my life, even though I was, 25. And I interviewed with Google to get the job there. That didn't go well. And then I decided to move to see if, moving over, getting a job over internet, getting the, job offer for US or Canada or Australia would not work well. Maybe if I moved to a graduate degree somewhere, I will be much easier then to get the job. So my goal was always to end up eventually to Silicon Valley to work for big companies, to be a programmer. And while I was in Canada, I moved to Canada to PhD. I interviewed also for Microsoft, and that either didn't go well. It was even not for a job; that was just for an internship. And in the meantime, my supervisor moved to Edinburgh, and Edinburgh it's in Europe, so it's closer. It's a better university, so I decided to follow him, and I moved as well to Edinburgh. And I eventually finished PhD. Finally, after 6 years, I finished PhD and got position at UniSA and moved here. And that's where I've been for the last 4 years. So that's really how I came to be, doing science, right? So it wasn't really started in that way. It wasn't planned. My plan was really be a programmer, get a good job, but it was moved in a different way. Just to give you a sense, Libya, that's where I'm born because my parents worked there. That's North Africa. And Serbia, for reference, it's slightly above there. So in middle of Europe, close to Greece. And yeah, so in my current position, what I do, so I'm, as I mentioned, doing all of this technology research around educational technologies. And we want to really, in a practical sense, develop better tools, develop better learning tools, learning applications, and so on, but also understand from a scientific perspective how humans learn, why, for example, highlighting is a good strategy to do, or why certain activities, rehearsing helps, and so on. and what kind of different technologies can help students with that. And also to see, can we improve the way teachers are teaching? And of course, identify students who need more support, like especially for big courses at university level. You can have a class with 300 students easily. Teacher doesn't know anybody, all of them, like it's impossible. So these kind of technologies can help us. And this field is called learning analytics. And that's what really comes to there is students are using certain technologies and they produce the data by clicking on things, doing things, completing assignments, doing all kinds of things, writing to each other, attending Zoom sessions, whatever. And then we use that data to analyze it. We look at it and produce certain visualizations most often. And we give those visualizations primarily to teachers, but sometimes even to students to show them, hey, this is how you're doing, this is how you're progressing, and so on. And then all of this data is, first of all, helping students to improve, but also teachers to do some intervention. For example, they might notice a group of students who are struggling with certain material. Excellent. We're going to help them. We now know that and that's really great, because often those students go undetected, and that's really a big problem. So this is like in a gist of what I'm doing. Other than doing research, I'm also teaching at university. So most people working in universities teach, and I'm teaching like these two things, like teaching data mining and data science, but also teach the educational technologies. And that's great, because when you're teaching, you get to know, you get exposed to different perspectives of different people, and that way you learn as well while teaching. And the coolest part about my job is really supervising PhD students. So this is one of my current PhD student. When he finished his undergraduate degree on the ceremony, so it's really great to be exposed to young people with their great ideas, and that's really the most rewarding part of doing science. To be honest, some of the cool perks: traveling to conferences. That's really great thing. That was really especially great while I was a PhD student. That was something I couldn't ever dream of, traveling like 5 to 6 times a year. That was unheard of. This currently a bit lower because of COVID, but hopefully things will go back. Really important thing, working with smart people. That's a really great thing. And in science and doing, STEM and science research, it's really great. You're dealing with very exceptionally bright people and you can learn from them. And of course, the great thing about you're really your own boss. That's something I really like about my job. And I decide what I want to do. If I care about this thing, if I care about how students use videos, I can spend time researching that. I don't have a specific thing, you need to do this. That really gives you a lot of flexibility. And I guess many people in academia don't like to be told what to do. We are all driven in our own ways, so you really don't like that. The good other thing, the jobs are pretty stable. Like when you're working at university, that's pretty stable. Those are not companies in a typical sense that will, 2 months later, they don't have a market, they fire you and so on. So, and that's coupled with this, that you're on your boss, it gives you time to do what you want to do. And of course, sometimes you dress up as Harry Potter on those graduation ceremonies. I couldn't find a photo of myself in one of them, but actually I was convincing my daughter for a long time that we are actually magicians, that we are all dressing up, that we are just hidden magicians dressing up from time to time on our annual meetings and gatherings of magicians. So while she was 5-year-old, she really believed that, and that's something really cool. Now, in terms of career choices, so really, as I mentioned, I never intended to be in academia, especially to work in educational technologies. And most people are like that. If you ask a scientist researching some algae, he'd never intended to do that. Those things you grow into position. So maybe you knew something, you care about biology or care about animals or something like that, but you eventually end up studying something specific. And that's fine. So don't think about if you don't know exactly what you want to do, or not even if you have a very vague idea, that's fine. That's how most people are. Nobody really starts knowing exactly what they want to do. Actually, when I went to PhD, I intentionally wanted to avoid doing with educational technology, because I know my supervisor was doing two things. computer science and educational technology. And I knew that there is a big chance he will try to convince me to do that. And I would really try to avoid that. But over time, things change. And then you realize that certain things are more interesting than you originally thought. And as mentioned, moving just to really trying to be an engineer. I was still into that mindset when I started my science career. But yeah, while I was in PhD, actually, I really completely changed. 2 years later, I completely changed, and I never wanted to go back to industry. And that's often you will see many people in research. They really like that freedom they have, and so really got excited about that and never went back. No, and that's coupled with the flexibility. We don't have, most people in science, they don't have 9 to 5 schedule, and that's good and bad. The good thing is when you have young kids, you can attend all of their sports days, all of the ceremonies, soccer matches, whatever. But you also are always like a small startup, right? You're always thinking about that. And it's not like you go at 5 p.m. home and you forget about your work. That's the nature of the job, because you're doing it, what you want. And in terms of advice, so I first, and probably the most important, don't think you're not for science just because you're not the crazy science freak who only thinks about those things. I wasn't like that. As while I was, high school, I was thinking about rollerblading, and in fact, that was the primary thing I was thinking about. During the university studies, again, never think of being a scientist. I liked computing and high tech, but never really was thinking that I will do that. And take easy steps. Like, for example, one of my PhD students, he finished TAFE. Then he finished the undergrad degree. Then he decided, maybe I can do an honors degree. After honors degree, we met, we discussed, and we offered him a position to become a PhD student. Now he's a PhD student doing an excellent, fantastic research. If you'd ask him in high school, he was, he started to do trade training, right? He wasn't going to become a scientist. So step by step, don't think those, that you need to have it all planned out. Nobody has. And an important bit with that is choices that you make are important, right? But they're not irreversible. If you decide, let's say, to go to study biology, or you're not sure, are you for biology or not? That's fine. Most people, actually, probably half of the people change their degree programs. That's making my job actually harder, because when I want to look at the data of the students, every single one changed programs. Students are changing so much, and that's great. You can start exploring something without having a strong penalty if you pick something that maybe it's not suitable for you. So there are probably I know more people who changed their path than they stayed on the one they had from get-go. So don't think of I join now, going to biology degree. That's it. I'm biologist for the rest of my life, even if I don't like it. That's really not the case. So all of those things are easy to change. An important bit when it comes to university experience is talk to professors. So they're always eager to find young people who want to do science and who want to just learn about science. So it's very hard to start your own project, but joining an existing project, absolutely possible, and they will all be thrilled with that. That will give you experience, you will see what it entails, right? So talk to them, say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about whatever is the topic that you care about. Talk to those professors, tutors, whoever, they will put you in contact, and you can then get engaged, get to see whether something is for you, and also open the door for yourself. So this comes down to links to this idea. Do stuff unrelated to projects. So whenever we are looking for students, we always look, okay, what extra they did. Like, for example, looking at data science students, they all did a bunch of projects, but all of the projects were from their coursework. In the year one, they had this project and they did this analysis. In year two, they did this analysis. That's all great. They probably got good grades. That's all fine. But what you're looking for is people who are self-driven. And it's not just about academia, it's for work as well. When I'm looking at somebody from data science, did they do something else on the side? So for example, one of the students analyzed analyze the different prices of housing. He downloaded the data and analyzed that, looking what would be the projection of price, something like that. Doesn't matter. Absolutely. It's just that you show that you have initiative, that you care about things, right? That's very important. And often it's very easy to do that when you join somebody who has an experience. That's why I said, talk to the people doing science. That's actually much easier to get in touch with that. And yeah, I guess that would be from me so far. So I'm really curious to hear if you have any questions or yeah, glad to have.
It was excellent. I really like that. I really love these series because it is a windy turn, and I would never have guessed the rollerblading.
Yes.
So I mean, I had a quick question because you did say, hey, I want to do programming, and I interviewed with Google and I interviewed with Microsoft, and they didn't go well.
Yeah.
What was it that didn't really quite wash for Google and Microsoft with you?
Well, that's the thing, you don't really know. But what was funny, I had a first Google interview. It was, I think, because I was preparing for those. I was really studying, preparing for the interviews. The questions weren't hard, actually. And the second interview went horribly wrong because the guy interviewing me lost internet. I'm not kidding. He's engineer in Google. He couldn't find internet connection. So his internet was breaking up. I was typing something in Google Doc. And I actually thought, given that really he messed up the interview, that he will let me go. He will say, oh, he was great, just to avoid, nope. And I never got to say, sorry, we're not, that wasn't well. You don't get the feedback. For Microsoft, the questions were way off of my league. I mean, the stuff they asked me to do, I really didn't know. So, and that was, and often those are interviews where you really have to prepare. So those are tricky questions they ask you, which never as a programmer ever used ever again, but they ask you those things in the interview, and that one didn't roll well. So, I mean, and to be honest, I wasn't so back then for Microsoft, I wasn't so much disappointed because I was really at that stage already thinking about maybe staying in academia, but, doing research, but then that opportunity showed up and sure, let's try. And then after that, I said, no, I really like this more than that.
So I mean, the other thing that has come out is that you've tic-tacked around the globe a little bit with your work. Yeah. What's some of the difficult things that when you move? I mean, you moved from, into Canada and then into Edinburgh. What's when you arrive somewhere new, what's the most difficult thing? Obviously, Adelaide was really easy to come into.
Yeah. So to be honest, that's depends how old you are when you do that. I guess some people start doing science right after the undergrad degree. They go to the undergrad degree, which is 3 years. They immediately finish the honors. They're in PhD when they're 22. I didn't do that. So I was 28 when I started PhD, but back then I was married, so I just got married. So I moved with my spouse, and that was a big difference because I didn't move alone. And people who move alone, it's slightly different. They often get engaged more with the local, with other students. So I wasn't so much involved with other students, as much as other, for example, friends that I know who moved. That's also, there's this, you're away from home. That's a bit challenging. In a completely new space, new language, everything. It helps if you have somebody. And that's something to. Now, of course, if you move, let's say within Australia, you're from Adelaide or Melbourne and you move to Brisbane, not a big deal. It's not that much of a difference. The problem is when you can come once a year and it takes all of your money that you have. So, yeah.
Yes. So we have had one question which says, you've mentioned that students and PhD students are doing their own self-driven projects. Is it related to the study or work, or something that's more generally they've gone after something as an inquiring mind that you find great?
So often how it goes is there are two kinds of ways there. One is when the academics get money for a project, and really the project is about specific thing. So then PhD students will start working on a concrete thing. And that's often quite easy, actually, because you already half of the things are done for you, right? But you always have a freedom to do within it certain things. For example, you let's say you're a cardiologist and you just got a certain money to research how certain drug affects blood rate, blood pressure or something like that. Then within it, there will be all kinds of differences. What about certain subgroups? What about the different regimes? And so you can research within a certain, like a bigger goal. And sometimes it's very open, like you say, hey, I'm doing educational research. You take a read into these basic readings just to get a sense of what people are doing and tell me what looks interesting to you. And then people say, hey, I'm curious to know about how students use search resources online while they're writing their essays. And I want to see how students incorporate, for example, different source materials when they're writing. Say, sure, that looks interesting. And you do that. Often they will be changing as well. So I had many situations when PhD students one of my friends, he started doing, he wanted to do music around computational generated music. Like, for example, when computers are composing, basically. Then he realized the level of musical knowledge you have to have there is way beyond he had. And then he eventually gave up and switched to something else. So he did similar thing, computationally generated images. And so because he actually knew far more about that. So people often change things, and that's absolutely fine. And so it's, often very self-driven. Yeah.
So what's maybe some of the left of field ideas that some of your PhD students have come up with, something that you say, I didn't even think of that.
So for example, one interesting thing that one of our students, the one I showed you in the picture, working on is we have grades at university and school everywhere. We give students grades, right? And we calculate GPA, big deal, just the average grade, fine. However, what we care about is, when this graduate, what are his communication skills? What are his problem-solving skills? Those things, grades are fine, they're important, but not so much, right? And then can we assess the level of somebody's communication skills, for example? And we should be able to do, for example, many of the courses have a team project. So you can be a great student, so that you're, average student, but average student who always aces teamwork projects. Or you can be the average student who, by the way the average are calculated, you always get bad in the team project. So you're still going to have the same GPA, but the way you're dealing with those won't be the same. So we're now he's trying to provide almost like a set to provide estimate of somebody's knowledge of these these complex soft skills. So we're trying to give, based on how they are doing through the university program, what is their problem solving? Can we give them the grade for problem solving? Because you don't get that. You go to the employer, say my GPA was this, here is my list of grades. What I really care about as a potential employer, what is your problem solving? How are you good with that? And that's why they have those interviews, right? They don't trust so much what's on the paper from the university. They want to know how you think, how you're solving the problem, how you talk to people, and so on. So that's why you have and if we can get that, we can help students, for example, in a third year to improve those skills. If we notice that this is a great student, he's getting, decently high grades, but he's struggling with problem solving. That's an excellent place to intervene, to do something. And that's something, for example, that he is working on, which is really exciting, like provide, not just the GPA, not a single number after all of your, years of study, but rather to provide a more detailed picture of how much somebody knows things.
That's fantastic, because as you say, you can't assess, are you a good communicator on a test? You can't do that. So that's great. One question I really like to ask our speakers is there a piece of advice that you would have given your high school self that you know now that might have helped your career path better or worse?
Probably talk more to people at university. That's something I haven't done much. For example, I did it eventually in fourth year when I got engaged with some of the professors who actually directed me to go to Canada and thought they gave me recommendation letters and so on. I think that's something that your experience at university can be quite different if you engage earlier. You do some internships, do different things, work with researchers on very exciting things. People do all kinds of crazy stuff in those settings that, it's... in Edinburgh, I was walking once in a hallway, some, basement. There's a huge soccer field full of robots in the building. I didn't know about that. How cool is that? They have a research lab. They were researching, actually, they have this annual competition in robot soccer. So they have literally the ball and robots running around the field. Like most of the undergraduates who go to University of Edinburgh don't have a clue about that they have that literally in front of their nose. So that's something I say it would be the important thing.
Okay, there now. Robot soccer sounds like just my thing.
Yeah, it's and all kinds of other very, very exciting things. People doing in Australia research on nature, wildlife, coral reef. All kinds of very, very exciting ideas and projects. And as if just focus on getting the grade, that you're missing a lot. You will be missing a lot.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily what you're excited about now is something, as you say, you can change to it some other way, which is great.
Yeah.
So what are you actually? What's the next big thing you'd like your research to work towards? So
at the moment, what I'm working on is mostly working with high schools. So what we have all of these digital technologies, mostly at university setting, and that's great. That's all fine. But far bigger impact is if we help students in say year 11 or year 12. So that's what we want to see, to do all of this analysis and all of this analytics and things. To do that a bit earlier. And then we can also help, for example, students in their subject recommendations and career trajectories, transfer to university. Starting university is often stressful for everybody. And no matter how smart you are, transition to university or anything like a big change like that is always stressful. So if we know a bit more how they did while they were year 11 and 12, we can help them transition better. So trying to move, I would say, few years down in this analysis, that will be really good.
And do you think you could apply your learning analytics to teacher professional development to see how teachers learn and teachers teach, I guess?
Yeah, we do that as well in some of, for example, how they're designing their courses, what they are using in designing, how they how much they're interacting with students as well. Are you a teacher who checks discussion board every day, or checks how students are doing every day and so on, or is somebody who just does it once a week? Right. So all of yes, definitely. That's how they are designing different learning materials and so on. Communicating, for example, there've been interesting research on how teachers communicate, whether the communication that's more encouraging, saying, hey, you missed the assignment, you still have an opportunity to do this, whether that will be a better approach, or to say, you didn't do assignment, if you don't complete it by then, you're going to fail. What kind of approach actually works better? And it's not always the same. Like for certain groups of students, one way works, a positive enforcement works better than the other one, and so forth.
Yeah, and I think it would be powerful for teachers to have that recognition of what how their students learn live in time, I guess. So that would be great. We've had a couple of questions come in. We might have one or two more if someone's keen to put one in. We'll give it a couple more minutes. But I've been really excited by the prospect of the data science, and it is a lot of computers and data. What is data mining actually? You brought that up in your talk.
Data mining is really looking, let's say you have the data, Amazon. Like look at the Amazon store. You have a bunch of transactions, who bought what every day, right? So this is the data they have in their database. Otherwise they wouldn't know, what to ship to anybody. But what you can realize, for example, that certain groups of products are associated to one another, or that the certain products are being more sold by certain demographics and so forth. So you can, for example, realize how to recommend products much better than normally would be possible. And that's this learning new things, like mining the data for new information that's not so obvious. For example, if I go on the website and I buy Harry Potter book, he will recommend me Terry Pratchett or other fantasy, because he realized, like, he likes that. So let me recommend him that thing. If I buy, about Star Wars, he will recommend probably not Star Trek, but some, like it recommend things that are in that genre, right? So that's really the important bit. So on the surface, if you just look at the transactions happening at Amazon, it's not obvious that people who love Harry Potter love Terry Pratchett. But if you analyze what's been bought together or what somebody bought, over time, you can realize that actually, similar people love similar things, right? So that's the idea, and companies are using that insanely, and we do the same. We want to look at the student interactions with the learning tools to figure out who's going to fail, who's not going to fail. So we are mining this data for a new interesting information. I guess
that's me off mute. It's how Facebook kind of finds out if you're, you click this ad, so you might like this ad as well, which is
yes. Or for example, you don't put your age on Facebook. You don't put your age, like you want to protect. Facebook knows when you were born, and by one fact, if Facebook looks at your contact friend list, there will be a massive spike in one of the years. There will be people born every single year, but let's say if in my network list, where probably 30% are born 1984. So I don't need to write Facebook what year I'm born. They know. By the fact they can look at my network and they can see that. They can see what country I'm from, because they have, I don't know, 1,000 people on Facebook, but probably 700 are from Serbia. Probably I'm also from Serbia, right? So it will be it's very easy for them. That's form of a data mine.
Without it, yeah, it's the world we live in. But it's been
yes,
it's been really lovely talking to you about your journey and your path and your work and everything that you're doing. And I'm looking forward to having more science about how students learn and how teachers teach in the future, which will be really great. So thank you all for joining us here on the Shape Your Future webinars. We will have another webinar next Tuesday with another pair of speakers next week. But please fill out our feedback form. You should get a link shortly, along with some extra information about Vitomir's work, which I will be sending through. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invite. It was really a pleasure.